lot of people in the visual effects industry have a catalyst movie that was the thing that triggered their ambitions to get into visual effects. So for me, that catalyst movie was Jurassic Park. So when Jurassic Park must have been 92, 93 came out, that was just as I was heading towards Vancouver to do animatronics, and I would have to peak Jurassic Park at the first visual effects film that really kind of revolutionized CG creatures. So photorealistic CG creatures was a big landmark for Jurassic Park. So I'd have to say that's where the 3D aspect of it drew me towards visual effects. I did not know what visual effects was, but the 3D dinosaur is pretty easy to understand. That can't be real, so it's like I want to learn how to do that. I started self-training from over on Vancouver Island on learning this program called Lightwave 3D, and basically took it as far as I could, just reading manuals and exploring and experimenting on my own, and then came to Vancouver and got into a local post-production facility called Image Engine. So Lost Boys was a year after working in the industry, and this is when visual effects was starting to start to get a little bit of a foothold in Vancouver. So at the time, I only had 2 competitors. At that time, there was probably about 8 visual effects artists in Vancouver, split between those 2 studios, and so it was definitely in its infancy. And that was at the beginning of the digital revolution in visual effects. So coming in at the beginning, I was right at that cusp when we were transitioning from $1 million standalone systems like the Inferno, where we have $500,000 computer and $500,000 software, to now we could start to leverage desktop technology. So more of the emphasis went on the artist and less on the machine. So instead of being an operator, we were artists. We had to use our problem-solving skills to be able to utilize maybe a machine that wasn't quite at the same caliber as the $1 million machines, but we could have more creative minds problem-solving together to come up with a more efficient solution than the brute force techniques that were done in the old days. So there was timing, I have to admit, was a big part of it. Coming in right at the digital revolution, digital visual effects was in its infancy. Nobody really knew what it was. A lot of the people that were existing in the market, the big players that were controlling everything, had no clue what to do when it came to digital visual effects. So there was an opportunity for young startups that were more comfortable with the technology side of it to really drive the industry forward on that. And there was multiple influences that made me decide to shift from service work into education. I'd have to say the biggest one was just a simple lifestyle shift. I had done that for 10 years and I started having children, so I needed some way of just getting a little bit more control over my schedule. The other major influence was there just was a severe lack of good education for our industry. The traditional education system was not structured to be able to provide a quality education in a market that evolved rapidly. So as I was saying, with the technology driving visual effects evolution, that was making a lot of traditional education systems lag behind a lot. They could not keep up with the rate of motion. And I saw that the way that we learned, the way that we trained our artists was the quickest way of efficiently learning a technique. So when I started the school, that was the main emphasis on the training, is that we have to learn like we learned in production. If we want to be able to generate a solid visual effects artist, we have to learn through project-based learning. Commenting on some recent backlash to visual effects, Hollywood learned that visual effects were going to bring people into the movie theaters. They're going to put bums in seats. They wanted to see a big spectacle. So definitely Hollywood capitalized on that spectacle value and put more of their cash flow into visual effects productions to polish their little feature films. So you have a lot of the ones that pop to mind are going to be the Marvel movies. So they have very loud, very obvious, very easy to see visual effects inside of them, and that's for a reason. It's like they're hitting a younger audience base, a family audience base. They like these big extravaganzas, but then when you go that big, it's going to be obvious that is not done in camera. So that's where it's easy for the critics to look at it and go, ha, that's terrible, that doesn't look well, it doesn't support the story effectively, things like that. But I think what we have to understand is that visual effects has become so permeated through all mediums. You'll see it in any kind of visual medium that a certain percentage of the audience base is getting a little overwhelmed by it. The fact that a director can revise anything that is visual in that film can be changed in post-production using visual effects techniques. So that has a lot of responsibility to have a level of maturity in the director to be able to control themselves creatively and not overburden the team with things that maybe aren't so important and focusing on the primary objectives of that film, which is supporting storyline. So if we look at this year, the Oscar winner was Ex Machina, and that was very subtle, very photorealistic, very soft, not loud visual effects. It didn't compete with the storyline, it supported the storyline. And so what we have to realize is that is everywhere right now. And every single feature film that gets made, even if it's just a simple indie film, there is visual effects that help to drive storyline. And those are just what we don't, the average viewer is not going to realize those things. So it's just growth in the industry, and it's just a reaction to the pure quantity that people are ingesting right now. Visual effects has always strived to be invisible effects. A good visual effect should not be noticed by the audience. The audience shouldn't be taken out of the story to go, wow, that's an amazing explosion. They should just see a scene that has some action and it moves forward from the story. So invisible effects aren't a new thing. They've been something that the industry's always driven towards. It's just a lot more of a separation between invisible effects and those big, loud, candy coatings that they put onto films these days. So there was talent that ended up keeping those projects growing and the momentum rolling inside of the industry. And that's probably the biggest thing right now, is a monopoly on talent that Vancouver kind of holds over a lot of other production centers, is that there's thousands of visual effects artists in Vancouver. We have at least over 5,000 artists in Vancouver. So if any big studio needs to be able to ramp up, build a crew really quickly for a new production, then they need to be immersed in that talent pool. And so that's right now what Vancouver's really enjoying, is a monopoly on the major talent pool. So Vancouver today, we have representation of almost every major studio, every major visual effects studio on the planet. So from Los Angeles and London being the two primaries that used to control everything, all the major studios from those two zones are now represented in Vancouver. So Vancouver's going to be currently the major talent hub. Even there's some of them that are moving their corporate headquarters to Vancouver. So to name a few, we have Industrial Light and Magic, obviously one of the big kingpins for myself that made Jurassic Park. In Vancouver we have Double Negative is a recent addition that just picked up the Academy Award for Ex Machina. And we have Sony, which is a big one. They get a lot of press. They're doing animation as well as visual effects. We have Digital Domain, which is a very large visual effects studio that's made a lot of big blockbusters. I could go on for quite some time. The only one that I'm waiting for to get into Vancouver is Weta. But everybody else is here. So it's a pretty exciting time to be able to be an artist and have all these major titans from our past as available work sites. So nowadays I'm quite jealous of an alumni that comes out of a visual effects school, because they can quite quickly, over a period of a couple of years, hit all of my major checklist items that I had as dreams and ambitions as a young artist, that they're actually hitting these things. So it's big. It's everybody is in Vancouver right now. It's very hot.